Tonight, let your heart slow down and your spirit rest in the faithfulness of God. As you listen to these words, know that you are not alone. There are moments in life when everything seems still, yet behind the stillness, God's hand moves quietly, weaving a greater story. Let us remember Joseph, a young man marked by dreams, blessed with a vision of purpose he could scarcely understand. Joseph was beloved by his father Jacob, wrapped in a coat of many colors, a gift that spoke of favor, of a future filled with hope. Yet favor does not shield us from suffering. Sometimes it invites it. Joseph's brothers, filled with envy and resentment, looked upon him not with love, but with hatred. His dreams of leadership, dreams of God's calling, became the very thing that turned their hearts against him. They could not bear the sight of him. They could not stand the thought of bowing before their younger brother. One day, when Joseph came to find them in the fields, they saw him from a distance, and their hearts grew darker. They conspired together, and stripping him of his coat, they threw him into a pit deep and empty, a symbol of betrayal, so bitter it could not be easily healed. Imagine Joseph there, alone, abandoned by those he trusted most, dreams crushed under the weight of betrayal, his cries echoing against the stone walls of the pit, unheard, unanswered by human ears. But heaven heard. Though unseen, God was near. Sold to travelers as a slave, Joseph was taken far from his home, far from the warmth of his father's tent, and placed in the house of Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, a foreign land, a life of servitude, a future that seemed lost. Yet Scripture tells us, the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. Genesis 39:2. It was not Joseph's surroundings that determined his destiny. It was not the betrayal of his brothers or the cruelty of strangers. It was the presence of God that shaped his path. Where others saw loss, God saw preparation. Where others saw defeat, God saw the foundation of a greater story. But trials did not end there. Potiphar's wife, desiring Joseph, falsely accused him when he refused her. Though innocent, Joseph was cast into prison, bound once more by injustice. Another pit, another betrayal. How many nights must Joseph have wept in that prison? How many days did he wonder if the dreams given to him had been only illusions? Yet the word says again, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love." Genesis 39:21. Even behind iron bars, God's plan moved forward. In the silence of that cell, Joseph was being shaped into the man who would one day save nations. In loneliness, he was learning to lean only on the faithfulness of God. In betrayal, he was being prepared to forgive. In captivity, he was being taught to rule with wisdom and mercy. Tonight, if you find yourself in a pit of despair, or if you feel trapped by circumstances beyond your control, remember Joseph. Remember that what looks like an end to you may only be the beginning to God. The pit is not the end of your story. The prison is not your final chapter. The dreams God placed in your heart were not lies. They were seeds, seeds that must sometimes fall into darkness before they bloom into the fullness of His promise. Hold fast to hope. Even when the world forgets you, heaven never does. Even when your prayers seem to echo unanswered, your cries are reaching the throne of grace. The same God who was with Joseph, unseen yet present, silent yet working, is with you tonight, watching, weaving, preparing. Your story is still being written, and the author is faithful. Rest now. Trust now. You are not alone. Time passed, and the prison walls grew familiar to Joseph. Days blended into nights, and seasons shifted unnoticed by those outside. Yet within those heavy walls, God was still at work. Though Joseph had been stripped of family, freedom, and reputation, there remained something no man could take from him: the favor of the living God. Joseph did not allow bitterness to rule his heart. Even in confinement, he served with diligence, with kindness, with faith. Over time, the keeper of the prison noticed. He placed Joseph in charge of the other prisoners, trusting him with the very place that had once been his cage. It is easy to believe that our faith is strongest when life is easy, but true faith shines brightest in the valley, when hope feels like a distant echo. Joseph's light did not flicker. In his silence, in his servanthood, he continued to trust in a plan he could not yet see. Then one night, 2 new prisoners were thrown into the dark halls of the prison, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker of Pharaoh himself. Stripped of their high positions, they now shared the same chains as Joseph. Each man was troubled, haunted by dreams that seemed to hold meaning beyond human understanding. In the stillness of the morning, Joseph noticed their sorrow. He could have turned away. He could have buried himself deeper in his own pain. But Joseph chose compassion. "Why are your faces so downcast today?" he asked gently. It is in the small mercies, the unnoticed kindnesses, that God's light often breaks through. The cupbearer spoke first, describing his dream of a vine with 3 branches, blossoms and clusters of ripe grapes. Joseph listened carefully. He did not offer comfort rooted in his own understanding. Instead, he said, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." In the quiet trust of that moment, Joseph honored the Lord. He explained the dream. Within 3 days, the cupbearer would be restored to his position in Pharaoh's court. The baker, desperate for hope, shared his dream as well, but Joseph's heart grew heavy. The interpretation was not one of restoration, but of judgment. Within 3 days, the baker would face death. Both dreams, both destinies were revealed just as Joseph had said. Before the cupbearer returned to Pharaoh's side, Joseph made one simple request: "Remember me, mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison." It was not a plea born of bitterness, but of the simple hope that his long night might finally end. Yet the cupbearer, restored to comfort and luxury, forgot Joseph, forgotten again, left once more in the shadows. And still, God was not finished. There are moments in our lives when it feels as though even those we have helped, those we have blessed, forget our existence. But our worth is not defined by man's memory. It is held safe in the heart of God. Tonight, if you feel overlooked, if you feel as though your kindness has been forgotten, remember Joseph. Remember that even when men forget, heaven remembers. God does not waste a single tear, a single act of kindness, a single moment of unseen faithfulness. Your story, like Joseph's, is still unfolding, and the author has not forgotten you. 2 full years passed after the cupbearer's restoration. 2 long years where Joseph remained in the depths of the prison, unseen and unheard by those in power. 2 years where each sunrise must have felt like a quiet question: "Has God forgotten me?" But heaven does not forget. At the appointed time, God stirred the dreams of Pharaoh himself. In the stillness of the night, Pharaoh saw visions that disturbed his spirit. Dreams of 7 fat cows grazing by the Nile, followed by 7 thin, sickly cows that devoured the fat ones. Another dream followed: 7 healthy heads of grain swallowed by 7 withered ones. Pharaoh awoke troubled, and no wise man, no sorcerer, no counselor could explain what the dreams meant. It was then that the cupbearer remembered. In the courts of power, in the midst of Pharaoh's distress, the cupbearer's memory was stirred by the hand of God. He spoke, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. There is a young Hebrew in the prison who interpreted my dreams, and they came to pass exactly as he said." And so Joseph, the forgotten prisoner, was summoned from the depths of the dungeon. He washed, he changed his clothes, and he stood before the most powerful man in the land, a shepherd turned slave standing before a king. Pharaoh said to him, "I have had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Joseph replied with humility, with truth, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Joseph did not grasp at glory. He did not promote himself. In the moment that could have lifted his life from chains to freedom, he pointed upward, giving honor to the true author of wisdom. Pharaoh told his dreams, and Joseph listened carefully. Then, by the Spirit of God, he explained, the two dreams were one message. 7 years of abundance were coming to Egypt, followed by 7 years of severe famine. God was warning Pharaoh to prepare, to gather grain during the years of plenty, to survive the years of want. Joseph not only interpreted the dream, he offered a plan, a solution rooted in wisdom beyond his years. "Let Pharaoh appoint a wise and discerning man over the land," Joseph advised, "to oversee the storing of food during the years of plenty." Pharaoh and all his officials saw the hand of God in Joseph's words. "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Pharaoh asked. And so in one day, Joseph's life was transformed, from prisoner to prince, from forgotten to honored. Pharaoh placed his signet ring on Joseph's hand, clothed him in fine linen, and placed a gold chain around his neck. He gave him authority second only to Pharaoh himself. Joseph rode in a chariot as men cried out before him, "Make way." In the blink of an eye, years of sorrow were answered with sudden purpose. But Joseph had been prepared for this moment in the pit, in the prison, in the loneliness where only God had been his strength. Tonight, remember this. No matter how long the night, no matter how forgotten you may feel, when God moves, he moves swiftly. Years of waiting are never wasted when placed in his hands. The pit prepared Joseph for leadership. The prison prepared Joseph for compassion. The betrayal prepared Joseph for wisdom. Every tear you have cried, every lonely night you have endured, has not been in vain. Your story is being written by the same hand that lifted Joseph from the ashes. And when your moment comes, you too will be ready. The years of abundance arrived, just as Joseph had said. The fields of Egypt yielded harvests beyond imagination. Grain piled high in storehouses, overflowing with the blessings of heaven's provision. Joseph, with wisdom granted by God, oversaw it all. The land flourished, and Egypt became a sanctuary of security, while the rest of the world drifted unknowingly toward famine. But Joseph's heart, though strengthened by purpose, still carried quiet scars. Somewhere beyond the borders of Egypt, his family lived, those who had sold him into slavery, those whose betrayal had shaped the very path he now walked. In the 7th year the famine began. Harsh and merciless, it swept through nations like a relentless wind. Crops failed, hunger gnawed at the edges of every village, every city, and far away in the land of Canaan, Joseph's father Jacob heard of grain in Egypt. Desperation drove the brothers to travel to the very place where the brother they had betrayed now ruled. They did not recognize him. How could they? The boy they had cast into a pit had become a man of authority, clothed in robes of state, speaking a foreign tongue. They bowed low before him, just as Joseph's dreams had once foretold. Joseph saw them and knew them instantly. In that moment, every memory must have surged within him. The pit, the chains, the tears. Yet Joseph did not reveal himself. He spoke harshly, testing them, pressing them to see if their hearts had changed. He accused them of being spies. He demanded they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, as proof of their honesty. Fear gripped them, but they obeyed, returning to Canaan to fetch the brother Joseph longed to see. In their absence, Joseph wept. His heart, though armored by years of pain, could not suppress the river of emotions that broke free. He turned away from his attendants and wept alone, hidden from the world, but not from God. When the brothers returned with Benjamin, Joseph's heart melted further. Seeing his mother's youngest son, alive and well, stirred the deepest chambers of his soul. He prepared a feast for them, seating them according to their birth order, a detail so intimate it unnerved them. And when Benjamin was given 5 times more food than the others, Joseph watched carefully. Would jealousy rise again? But no jealousy appeared, only gratitude. Still, Joseph tested them one final time. He placed his silver cup in Benjamin's sack and sent them on their way. Then he sent his steward after them, accusing them of theft. When the cup was found, the brothers tore their garments in grief and returned, falling at Joseph's feet. Judah, once a willing participant in Joseph's betrayal, now offered himself in Benjamin's place, pleading for mercy, choosing sacrifice over selfishness. And in that moment, Joseph could bear it no longer. He cleared the room of Egyptians. He stood before his brothers, trembling, overwhelmed, and wept so loudly that all of Pharaoh's house heard. "I am Joseph," he cried. "Is my father still alive?" Terror gripped his brothers, but Joseph did not punish them. He did not seek revenge. He spoke with the heart of one who had seen the hand of God, even in betrayal. "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." Genesis 45:5. Joseph forgave. He embraced them, weeping upon them. The years of pain, betrayal, and silence were washed away by the flood of mercy. Tonight, remember this: forgiveness is not forgetting the hurt. Forgiveness is remembering the hurt and choosing mercy anyway. It is seeing God's purpose, even in the darkest betrayal. Your wounds, like Joseph's, are not wasted. They are the places where God's mercy will shine, the brightest. And one day, when you stand before those who hurt you, you too will find that love is stronger than hate, and mercy is greater than vengeance. News of Joseph's survival and success spread quickly through Pharaoh's palace. Pharaoh, pleased with Joseph's heart and service, commanded that Joseph's family be brought to Egypt. Wagons and supplies were sent, a royal escort to carry a once-broken family into a land of provision and safety. Joseph sent his brothers back to Canaan, their hearts still trembling from the miracle they had witnessed. They returned to their father Jacob, the man whose sorrow had never fully healed. They spoke the words Jacob could scarcely believe: "Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt." At first, Jacob's heart stood still. Grief had buried his hope for so long that resurrection seemed impossible. But when he saw the wagons, when he heard the full testimony, life returned to his weary bones. "My son Joseph is alive. I will go and see him before I die," he said. The journey to Egypt began, a caravan not only of goods and livestock, but of restoration. Step by step, Jacob moved closer to the son he had mourned for so many years. Yet even as he traveled, Jacob's heart trembled with fear. To leave the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and himself was no small thing. But God, ever faithful, met him in the night. In a vision the Lord spoke, "Jacob, Jacob, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I will go down with you, and I will also bring you up again." Genesis 46. 2-4. Strengthened by the voice of God, Jacob continued onward. When Joseph saw the caravan approaching, he prepared his chariot and rode out to meet his father. The moment their eyes met, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Joseph, the boy torn away, now a man adorned in glory, fell upon his father's neck and wept for a long time. Jacob, feeling the arms of his son around him, said through his tears, Now let me die, since I have seen your face, and know that you are still alive." The embrace between father and son was more than reunion. It was redemption. Joseph presented his family before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh welcomed them warmly, offering them the best of the land, the fertile region of Goshen, where they could thrive. Years of famine continued, but Jacob's family was sheltered and blessed under Joseph's protection. What once began in betrayal now unfolded into a tapestry of salvation. What was meant for evil had been turned by God's hand into good. Joseph, despite his high station, never abandoned his humility or his faith. He continued to lead wisely, to provide not only for Egypt, but for his family and the nations that came seeking food. Tonight, remember this: no pit is too deep, no betrayal too final, no separation too wide for the hand of God to redeem. Restoration is not always instant. Sometimes it is a long road of pain, patience, and quiet trust. But God's promises do not fail. His plans do not falter. What He speaks over your life will come to pass, even when the road leads through sorrow. If your heart is carrying losses that seem beyond repair, if you are waiting for a reunion that seems impossible, hold fast to hope. The same God who reunited Joseph and Jacob after years of heartbreak is the same God who watches over your story. The embrace you long for, the healing you pray for, the redemption you dream of, they are not forgotten. Your Father in heaven sees you, and His promises still stand. The days passed in the land of Goshen, and Jacob's family grew and prospered under Joseph's care. Egypt, though foreign, became a place of refuge, a place where a broken family could begin again under the shelter of grace. As the years wore on, the time came when Jacob, now old and full of days, felt his life drawing to its close. He summoned his sons, gathering them around his bed for one final blessing, words that would not merely comfort them, but shape generations yet to come. Each son approached, and Jacob spoke over them, not just of who they were, but of who they would become. His blessings and prophecies carried the weight of experience, sorrow, and hope. To Judah, he gave the most beautiful promise: the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. Genesis 49:10. Through Judah's line would come kings, and ultimately the true king, Jesus Christ. Jacob's eyes, though dim with age, saw beyond the present. He spoke life into a future none of them could yet imagine. When he had blessed them all, Jacob charged his sons to bury him, not in Egypt, but in the cave of Machpelah, beside Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, a reminder that though Egypt was their refuge for now, their true home was still the land God had promised. Then, with his heart at peace and his family gathered around him, Jacob drew his last breath. Joseph wept over his father, kissed him, and mourned deeply. His love for his father was not diminished by years apart or by his own rise to power. Joseph ordered that Jacob be embalmed, and all of Egypt mourned him for 70 days, a tribute reserved for kings. With Pharaoh's blessing, Joseph and his brothers carried Jacob's body back to Canaan, fulfilling his last wish. It was a solemn, sacred journey, marked by honor and remembrance. But when they returned to Egypt, Joseph's brothers grew fearful. Now that their father was gone, would Joseph finally seek revenge for all they had done to him so many years ago? They sent a message to Joseph, pleading for forgiveness once more, and even offered themselves as his slaves. But Joseph's heart remained true to God's mercy. He spoke to them with kindness, with a heart full of compassion. "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. Genesis 50:19-20. Joseph's forgiveness was not rooted in forgetting the past. It was rooted in seeing God's hand through the pain. What others intended for destruction, God had transformed into salvation. Joseph lived many more years in Egypt, seeing the children of his children, watching the family grow into a great people. Even in a foreign land, he held fast to the promises of God. Before his death, Joseph made his brothers promise that when God visited them, for he was certain God would, they would carry his bones back to the land of promise. Even in death, Joseph's heart remained anchored not to Egypt, but to the covenant of God. Tonight, remember this: true forgiveness sets not only others free, but also your own soul. True faith sees beyond the immediate pain into the eternal purposes of heaven. Your suffering has not been wasted. Your waiting has not been meaningless. What the enemy planned for your harm, God is already turning for your good. Like Joseph, you may not see the full picture today, but one day you will look back and see that every step, every tear, every heartbreak was woven into a masterpiece far greater than you ever imagined. The God who walked beside Joseph walks beside you still, and his promises are forever. The story of Joseph reminds us that God's hand never leaves his children, even through betrayal, prisons, and pain. Yet Joseph's journey is not the only one where heaven's quiet work is seen most clearly in suffering. Tonight, we turn our hearts to another man of quiet strength, Moses, the reluctant leader, the child drawn from the waters, destined to lead a nation from chains into freedom. Long before Moses stood before Pharaoh, long before plagues darkened Egypt and seas were parted, there was fear, there was hiding, there was pain. The Hebrews, descendants of Joseph's family, had grown numerous in Egypt. Generations had passed, and a new Pharaoh rose, one who did not remember Joseph, one who feared the strength of the Israelites. He enslaved them, burdened them with harsh labor, and ordered the unthinkable, that every Hebrew boy born should be cast into the Nile and drowned. In the midst of sorrow, Moses was born. A mother, desperate to protect her son, hid him for 3 months. When she could no longer conceal him, she crafted a small basket from reeds, coated it with tar to make it waterproof, and placed her precious child upon the waters of the Nile. Imagine the ache in her heart as she watched the current carry him away. Imagine the prayers whispered through her tears. But God was watching. Pharaoh's daughter, bathing by the river, saw the basket. Her heart was moved with compassion, and she drew the child from the water, naming him Moses, which means drawn out. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's household, clothed in royal garments, educated among the wise. Yet within his heart, he never forgot the cries of his people, the groans of the slaves who shared his blood. One day, seeing an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, Moses' heart burned with anger. In a moment of passion, he killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. But word spread. Fear seized Moses. He fled into the desert, far from the courts of Pharaoh, far from the place he once called home. In the wilderness of Midian, Moses became a shepherd. A man who once walked marble halls now walked rocky paths, tending sheep in silence. 40 years passed. 40 years of ordinary days, of quiet nights under the stars, of wondering if the dreams of his youth were dead. But God had not forgotten Moses. The wilderness was not a punishment. It was a preparation. Tonight, if you find yourself wandering a desert of waiting, a season where your dreams seem distant and your prayers unanswered, remember Moses. Remember that the desert is not the end. It is the training ground for destiny. Moses learned patience there. He learned humility. He learned to listen for the whisper of God's voice among the winds and sands. One day, while leading his flock near Mount Horeb, Moses saw a sight that would change everything. a bush, engulfed in flames yet not consumed. And from within the fire, God called his name, Moses. He answered simply, "Here I am." The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had not forgotten his promise. He had heard the cries of his people, and he had chosen Moses, the runaway, the broken, the reluctant, to be his instrument of deliverance. Tonight be reminded, God often calls us, not in our moments of strength, but in our moments of surrender. He speaks not to the proud, but to the willing. And when he calls your name, no wilderness, no failure, no fear can stop the story he is writing through your life. The same God who drew Moses from the waters, who called him from the flames, is calling you too. He is never late, he is never silent, and he is always near. Standing before the burning bush, Moses trembled. The desert wind stirred around him, the flame danced without consuming, and the voice of the Almighty filled the air. God had called him, not as a prince of Egypt, not as a man of great reputation, but as a shepherd who had tasted both failure and loneliness. And now, the Creator of heaven and earth spoke directly to him. "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt," said the Lord, "and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them." Exodus 3:7-8. Moses listened, heart pounding. God continued, "Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." But Moses, though awed by God's presence, recoiled in fear. "Who am I," he said, "that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" It is a question many of us whisper in our hearts when God calls, "Who am I?" Too broken, too small, too flawed to carry out something so great. But God's answer to Moses was not a list of qualifications. It was a promise, "I will be with you." It was not about Moses' strength, it was about God's presence. Still, Moses wrestled with doubt. "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" Then came one of the most sacred revelations in all of Scripture. God said to Moses, "I am who I am." Exodus 3:14. "Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. I am the God who is not bound by time, not changed by circumstances, not diminished by human weakness, the one who was, who is, and who will always be." This was the name Moses was to carry. Still, Moses hesitated. "But they will not believe me," he said. And God, patient and compassionate, gave Moses signs: the staff that would turn to a serpent, the hand that would become leprous and then be healed, signs to strengthen Moses' trembling heart. Yet Moses protested once more, "I am not eloquent. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord's answer was gentle, yet firm. "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute, or deaf, or seeing, or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and teach you what you shall speak." Exodus 4:11-12. Even then, Moses pleaded, "O my Lord, please send someone else." And the anger of the Lord was kindled, yet still he provided. He gave Moses his brother Aaron to speak for him, promising that both would carry the message together. Tonight, if you feel unworthy, if fear grips your heart when you sense God calling you forward, remember Moses. Remember that God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called. He does not seek those who boast of their own strength. He seeks those humble enough to lean wholly upon him. Moses, the fugitive, the stammerer, the broken, was chosen not because he was perfect, but because he was willing, even in fear, even in weakness, to trust in the great I Am. And you too are being called, not when you are strongest, but when you are honest enough to say, "Here I am, Lord, send me." The God who stood in the fire is the same God who stands beside you now. He is still the I Am. He is still enough, and he is still calling. With the call of God burning in his heart, Moses gathered his courage, took up his staff, and set his face toward Egypt, the land he once fled in fear. Beside him walked Aaron, his brother, his voice, his companion in the journey that lay ahead. They went not in their own strength, but under the command of the Almighty, carrying a message that would shake empires and part seas. "Let my people go." When they stood before the elders of Israel, Moses performed the signs God had given him. The staff turned to a serpent, the hand healed from leprosy, and the people believed. They bowed their heads and worshipped, for they saw that God had visited his people, and they dared to hope for deliverance. With that hope alive, Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh himself, the king of the strongest empire on earth. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel," they declared, "Let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He scoffed at the request. "Who is the Lord," he said, "that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." In defiance, Pharaoh increased the burden upon the Hebrews. He commanded that they continue to make bricks without being given straw, forcing them to gather their own materials while maintaining their quotas. The people's cries grew louder, but not in praise, in bitterness. They turned against Moses and Aaron, accusing them of making their suffering worse. Moses, broken-hearted, turned to God. "O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all." It is easy to trust when deliverance comes swiftly. It is harder to trust when obedience seems only to make the suffering worse. But God was not shaken. His promises had not faltered. He answered Moses with words of unshakable assurance. "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he will send them out, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land." Exodus 6:1. God reminded Moses of his covenant, the ancient promise made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and declared again that he would bring his people out from under the burdens of Egypt. He would redeem them with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. Still, the people's hearts were broken and their spirits crushed. They could not hear the promise over the weight of their suffering. Moses too wrestled with doubt, questioning how Pharaoh would ever listen to him, a man slow of speech. But God does not abandon those he calls. Step by step, he strengthened Moses, shaping him into the leader who would stand firm against the greatest power on earth. Tonight, remember this: obedience does not always lead to immediate deliverance. Sometimes it leads first through deeper valleys, greater challenges, and darker nights. But the darkness is not the end. Every burden, every unanswered prayer, every painful step is known by God. He is not late. He is not silent. He is preparing a victory so complete that it will leave no doubt that it was his hand alone that saved you. If you feel tonight that your obedience has only led to more pain, do not lose heart. Hold fast. The same God who led Moses through rejection and sorrow will lead you too, not around the fire, but through it, until you stand free, with songs of deliverance on your lips. Your story is still unfolding, and the God who called you will not fail. The time for quiet patience had passed. The time for God's mighty hand to move had come. Moses and Aaron stood once more before Pharaoh, no longer pleading but commanding in the name of the Lord. Let my people go, that they may serve me." Pharaoh's heart, like stone, refused. And so the Lord began to stretch forth his hand, not only to humble a king, but to reveal to all of Egypt and to Israel that he alone is God. Aaron cast down his staff before Pharaoh, and it became a serpent. Pharaoh's magicians, skilled in the dark arts, did the same by their secret enchantments. Yet Aaron's serpent swallowed theirs whole, a silent testimony that no magic could stand before the power of God. Still Pharaoh hardened his heart, and so the first plague came. Moses, at God's command, struck the waters of the Nile with his staff, and all the water turned to blood. The fish died, the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink. Life, once nourished by the river, was now corrupted, but Pharaoh's heart remained cold. 7 days passed, and Moses returned. Again he spoke the Lord's command, and again Pharaoh refused. So the second plague came, frogs in unimaginable numbers, pouring into houses, beds, ovens, and kneading bowls. The land was overcome. Pharaoh, pressed by the people's suffering, pleaded for relief and promised to let the people go. Moses prayed, and the frogs died. But when the pressure lifted, Pharaoh's promise crumbled. His heart grew hard once more. Then came gnats swarming through Egypt, covering man and beast alike. The magicians of Egypt, powerless to replicate this plague, whispered to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh would not listen. Next came swarms of flies, filling homes, corrupting the land, bringing misery without end. Yet in Goshen, where the Israelites lived, there were no flies, a clear division between God's people and the oppressors. Still Pharaoh's heart would not yield. Then disease struck the livestock of Egypt, sparing none of their animals, while Israel's herds remained untouched. Then painful boils broke out on the people and animals alike, so severe that the magicians could no longer even stand before Moses. Still Pharaoh clung to his pride. Then came hail, not ordinary hail, but a storm so fierce that it shattered trees, crushed crops, and killed men and beasts left outside. Fire flashed continually amidst the hail, a terror Egypt had never seen before. Pharaoh, terrified, called Moses and Aaron and confessed, "This time I have sinned. The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong." Moses prayed, and the hail ceased. But once again Pharaoh hardened his heart after the danger passed. Tonight, remember this. Pride blinds even the powerful. It hardens the heart against mercy, against truth, against the gentle whisper of God's voice. And yet, even in Pharaoh's rebellion, God's justice moved with patience, not cruelty. He gave Pharaoh chance after chance to soften, to repent, to choose mercy over stubbornness. Our God is patient, not wishing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. But there comes a time when patience must give way to judgment. If you are facing a situation where injustice seems to reign, where the proud seem to prosper, know this: God sees, God waits, and God acts at the appointed time. No power on earth can stand against his will forever. And for those who trust him, even when the world seems unshaken by his warnings, there is shelter under his wings. Stay close to him, stay humble, stay ready, for the God who delivered Israel is the same God who watches over you tonight, and his promises will not fail. The land of Egypt, once proud and prosperous, now trembled under the hand of God. Yet Pharaoh's heart, though battered, remained unyielding. Pride can become a prison deeper than any cell, and Pharaoh sat chained within walls of his own making. The Lord spoke to Moses again. "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, and the heart of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with Egypt and performed miraculous signs among them, and that you may know that I am the Lord. Exodus 10, 1-2. This was no longer merely a conflict between a nation and its oppressor. It was a revelation, a story that would be told for generations, a testimony to the faithfulness and power of God. Moses and Aaron stood once more before Pharaoh. "How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me?" they asked. "Let my people go, that they may serve me. But if you refuse, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your country." Locusts, a plague that would strip the land bare, devouring every green thing left after the hail. Pharaoh's own officials, weary of suffering, pleaded with him, "Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is ruined?" But Pharaoh, ever bargaining, proposed a compromise. Only the men could go, leaving the women and children behind. Moses refused. Deliverance would not be partial. God's redemption would not leave families divided. And so Moses stretched out his staff, and the Lord sent an east wind that blew all that day and night. By morning, swarms of locusts covered the ground, so thick that the land grew dark beneath them. They devoured every plant, every fruit, leaving desolation in their wake. Pharaoh, in panic, called for Moses and Aaron once again. "I have sinned against the Lord your God, and against you," he said. "Now forgive my sin once more, and pray to the Lord your God to take this deadly plague away from me." Moses prayed, and the Lord shifted the wind, driving the locusts into the Red Sea. But Pharaoh's heart hardened yet again. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward the sky, so that darkness will spread over Egypt, darkness that can be felt." And so Moses stretched out his hand, and a thick darkness covered Egypt for 3 days. No one could see anyone else, or move from where they were. Yet once again, the Israelites had light in the places where they lived. Pharaoh summoned Moses. "Go serve the Lord," he said. "Even your women and children may go with you. Only leave your flocks and herds behind." But Moses answered firmly, "Our livestock must go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind." Deliverance demanded everything. No compromise, no half measures. Pharaoh, enraged, banished Moses from his sight. "Get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die." And Moses replied, "Just as you say, I will never appear before you again." The final confrontation had come. The last plague, the most terrible, would fall tonight. Remember this: true deliverance comes without compromise. When God calls you out of bondage, He calls you completely. Not half your heart, not half your trust, all of it. The enemy will offer bargains, half promises, chains disguised as freedom. But God's call is clear: come out entirely. Leave no part of yourself enslaved to the past. And if the darkness seems overwhelming now, if the waiting feels endless, know this: it is often darkest just before the greatest deliverance. God's hand is moving, even when the night is thick and the morning of freedom is near. Stay faithful, stay steadfast. The God who stood with Moses stands with you still. The night of deliverance had come. The Lord spoke to Moses, his voice solemn and sure. One final plague would fall upon Egypt, one that would break the pride of Pharaoh and free God's people at last. "I will pass through the land of Egypt," said the Lord, "and I will strike down every firstborn, both man and beast. Against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord." Exodus 12:12. But amidst the coming sorrow, God prepared a way of protection for His people, a sign that would mark them as His own. Each family was to take a spotless lamb, without blemish, and sacrifice it. They were to take some of its blood and paint it upon the doorposts and lintels of their homes. Then they were to remain inside, feasting on the lamb, ready to move when the time came. The blood would be a sign. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Exodus 12:13. It was a night that would be remembered forever. The Passover. Imagine the scene, homes lit by flickering lamps, the air thick with anticipation, mothers holding their children close, fathers marking the doors with trembling hands, silent prayers rising from trembling hearts, trusting not in their strength, not in their worthiness, but in the blood of the Lamb. And outside, in the darkness, a stillness fell that was heavier than any before. Then, as the night deepened, the judgment came. Throughout Egypt, a great cry arose, a cry of grief and terror, as every firstborn in the land fell. From the palace of Pharaoh to the humblest cottage, no house untouched by sorrow. But among the Israelites, not even a dog barked. Under the covering of the blood, there was peace, there was protection. Pharaoh, broken at last, summoned Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night. "Leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go and bless me also." Freedom at last. The Israelites, carrying the gold, silver, and clothing given by the Egyptians, began their journey out of bondage. Hundreds of years of slavery ended in a single night. The Lord himself went before them, a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, never leaving his people as they stepped into their destiny. Tonight, remember, this deliverance does not come because we are strong or wise or worthy. It comes because God is faithful. It comes by the blood of the Lamb. The same God who shielded his people in Egypt shields you even now. The same covering, the same mercy is available for every heart willing to trust in him. If the night around you feels dark, if fear whispers that judgment is near, take heart. The blood still speaks. The sacrifice has been made. The Lamb of God, Jesus Christ, has already marked your life with his own blood, and no enemy, no judgment, no darkness can snatch you from his hand. Rest under his covering, trust in his promise, and know that even in the deepest night, you are protected by a love that death itself cannot overcome. The journey had begun. For the first time in generations, the people of Israel walked not as slaves but as a free people. They carried with them the memories of pain and sorrow, but also the promises of God, promises that stretched back through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They did not leave Egypt alone. The Lord himself went before them, a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on their way, and a pillar of fire by night to give them light. Neither the cloud nor the fire departed from before the people. God's presence was not distant, it was visible, constant, faithful. Step by step, they followed. It would have been easy for God to lead them by the shortest road, the straight path through the land of the Philistines, but he knew their hearts. He knew they were not yet ready for war, not yet ready for greater battles. Instead, he led them by the longer path through the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Sometimes the longer road is not punishment but protection. When the Israelites camped by the sea, Pharaoh's heart once again turned to hatred. He gathered his army, 600 of his best chariots, and all the other chariots of Egypt, and pursued the Israelites. As Pharaoh's army approached, the Israelites lifted their eyes and saw the Egyptians marching after them. Fear gripped their hearts, and they cried out to the Lord. They turned against Moses, their fear blinding them to the miracles already behind them. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? They cried. What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Fear often makes us forget how far God has already brought us. But Moses stood firm. He said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." Exodus 14:13-14. God commanded Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea, and the waters by the mighty breath of God parted. Walls of water rose on either side, and a dry path opened before them. The Israelites stepped forward into the impossible, not by their strength, but by the faithfulness of their deliverer. Pharaoh's army pursued them into the sea, but God fought for his people. The wheels of the chariots jammed. Confusion spread, and when the Israelites had crossed safely, Moses stretched out his hand once more, and the waters returned with a mighty roar, covering the armies of Egypt. Not one remained. And there, on the far shore, the Israelites looked back and saw their enemies defeated. They lifted their voices in a song of praise, a song that echoed through the wilderness, a song of victory and deliverance. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. Exodus 15:1. Tonight, remember this: the road may be longer than you expected. The sea may seem impassable. The enemy may seem too strong. But the God who parts seas is the same God who walks beside you now. When you feel trapped, when fear grips your heart, stand firm. Do not look back. Do not listen to the voice of fear. Listen to the voice that calls you forward, the voice that says, I will fight for you, and trust that even when you see no way through, God is already making a path. You are not alone. The one who led Israel through the sea leads you too, and he never fails. The sea had closed behind them. The threat of Egypt was gone, but ahead of them lay a vast and unfamiliar wilderness, a land without roads, without cities, without certainty. Freedom had come, but freedom did not mean the journey would be easy. The Israelites walked into the desert, led only by the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, the visible reminder that though they did not know the way, they were not alone. 3 days into the wilderness, they found no water. The joy of their deliverance began to fade, replaced by thirst and fear. When they came to Marah, they found water at last, but it was bitter, undrinkable. Their hearts, fragile and weary, turned again to complaint. What shall we drink? They cried. Moses cried out to the Lord, and God showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it into the waters, and the waters were made sweet. It was there at Marah that God made a decree. If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord, your healer. Exodus 15:26. God was not only their deliverer, he was their healer. From Marah, they traveled to Elim, where 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees awaited them, an oasis of rest prepared by God himself. But the journey continued, and soon hunger gnawed at their hearts. Once again, fear rose among the people. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, where we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. How quickly the memory of chains faded when compared to the uncertainty of faith. But God, patient and faithful, did not abandon them to their fears. That evening, quail covered the camp, providing meat, and in the morning, when the dew lifted, a fine, flake-like thing appeared on the ground, manna, bread from heaven. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat." Exodus 16:15. Each morning they gathered what they needed for that day, no more, no less, and every day God provided anew. Manna in the morning, faithfulness at dawn, a rhythm of trust, teaching them to depend not on stockpiles or human plans, but on the steady hand of their provider. Tonight, remember this: the wilderness is not a place of abandonment, it is a place of training, a place where faith is forged not by seeing the destination, but by trusting the one who leads. If you find yourself in a season where each day feels uncertain, where the future seems dry and barren, know this: God has not brought you here to leave you. He is teaching you to trust His provision. He is teaching you to find joy in the daily bread. You may not see the end of the journey yet. You may not understand every twist of the path, but the same God who sent manna from heaven, who brought water from bitter springs, walks with you even now, morning by morning, mercy by mercy. He provides, and His faithfulness will never fail. Step by step, the people of Israel journeyed deeper into the wilderness. The road was not easy, but every step was shaped by the unseen hands of a faithful God, guiding them toward a promise they had not yet seen, but were called to trust. As they traveled, the Lord continued to provide water from rocks, protection from enemies, guidance by cloud and fire. Yet, God desired something even greater for His people than provision alone. He desired relationship. He desired that they would know Him, not only as deliverer, but as covenant maker, as Father. And so, in the 3rd month after leaving Egypt, Israel came to the desert of Sinai. They camped before the mountain, a place where heaven would touch earth. Moses climbed the rugged slopes of Sinai to meet with God, and there, amidst the wilderness winds and burning sun, the voice of the Almighty spoke to him. "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Exodus 19:4-6. Imagine the wonder: a nation of former slaves, now called God's treasured possession, a people set apart for His glory. But the encounter was not casual. God's holiness was not something to be approached lightly. He commanded that the people consecrate themselves, to wash their garments, to prepare their hearts, for on the 3rd day the Lord would descend upon Mount Sinai in sight of all the people. When the morning of the 3rd day came, the mountain shook, thunder roared, lightning flashed across the sky. A thick cloud covered the summit, and the blast of a trumpet grew louder and louder. The entire mountain was wrapped in smoke, because the Lord had descended upon it in fire. The people trembled. Moses led them out to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain, gazing upward in awe and fear. Then the Lord spoke, not through Moses, but directly, His voice rolling like thunder, declaring the 10 Commandments to His people. "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet." Each word carved not only into stone, but into the hearts of the people. The people, overwhelmed by the glory and fearfulness of God's presence, begged Moses to speak to God on their behalf. They could not bear the sound of his voice. Moses answered them, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin." Exodus 20:20. It was not terror God sought to plant in their hearts, but reverence, a holy awe that would guard their steps and guide their lives. Tonight remember this: the same God who delivers also calls. He does not lead us into freedom merely to wander. He calls us into relationship. He calls us to holiness. He calls us to walk not by fear, but by faith and love. The fire on Sinai, the thunder in the skies, they are reminders that God is not distant. He is near, holy, mighty, tender, and even now he calls you to draw near, not in terror, but in trust. The same voice that spoke on the mountain speaks to your heart still. Listen and live. After the thunder, the fire, and the voice of the Almighty had filled the mountain, God called Moses to come up higher, to enter deeper into his presence, away from the trembling crowd below. Moses climbed the slopes of Sinai once again, stepping into the cloud of glory that wrapped the summit like a living veil. For 40 days and 40 nights, Moses remained there face to face with the presence of the Eternal. There, in the heart of the cloud, God gave Moses more than commandments carved in stone. He gave him the blueprints for a new way of living. He revealed the design for the tabernacle, a sacred dwelling where God's presence would live among his people, not far off, not hidden away, but near. Among them, every detail was shaped by God's own hand: the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, the golden lampstands, the altars of sacrifice and incense. Each piece a reflection of heaven's pattern, a reminder that the holy God had chosen to dwell with frail humanity. "Let them make me a sanctuary," God said, "that I may dwell in their midst." Exodus 25:8. Imagine it, the Creator of the universe desiring not palaces of marble, but tents in the wilderness, that he might walk among his children. During those days, God also gave Moses laws and statutes, principles to guide a free people into a holy life. Laws of justice and mercy. Laws protecting the weak and honoring the sacredness of life. God was not merely rescuing his people from Pharaoh, he was shaping them into a people who would reflect his heart to the world. But while Moses stood in the presence of God, receiving treasures of wisdom and grace, trouble brewed below. The people, waiting at the foot of the mountain, grew restless. They had seen the miracles. They had crossed the sea. They had eaten manna from heaven. Yet still, fear and impatience gripped them. They gathered around Aaron and demanded, "Make us gods who shall go before us." As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And so Aaron, pressured by the crowd, gathered gold from their earrings, melted it, and fashioned a calf, an idol to satisfy their longing. They built an altar before it. They offered sacrifices. They rose up to dance and feast before the work of their own hands. The very people God had saved turned their hearts back to the ways of slavery, to gods made of stone and metal, to the hollow worship of things they could see and touch. On the mountain, God saw it all. His heart, filled with love, burned with sorrow and righteous anger. He said to Moses, "Go down, for your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves." Tonight, remember this. It is easy to trust God when the cloud is visible, when the miracles are fresh. It is harder when we are called to wait, to trust in silence, to believe in the unseen. Faith is not merely trusting God in the victories, it is trusting Him in the waiting. And when fear tempts you to build idols of your own making, things you can see, touch, and control, Remember the God who waits for you at the top of the mountain. He calls you not to the safety of idols, but to the glory of his presence. Hold fast, trust the silence. God is not absent. He is preparing something greater than you can imagine, and he will not fail. Moses descended the mountain, carrying the 2 tablets of the covenant, stones carved by the very finger of God, heavy not only with weight, but with sacred promise. As he drew closer to the camp, the sounds of singing and celebration reached his ears, but it was not the song of worship. It was the noise of idolatry, of a people who had turned their hearts away in the waiting. Moses saw the golden calf, gleaming in the sunlight, surrounded by dancing and feasting. The sight pierced him deeper than any sword. The covenant, freshly born from the heart of God, had already been broken. In his grief and righteous anger, Moses hurled the tablets from his hands, shattering them at the foot of the mountain, a visible sign of the broken relationship between heaven and earth. He burned the golden calf in fire, ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the people drink it, a bitter reminder of their rebellion. Moses turned to Aaron, the brother he had trusted, and asked, "What did this people do to you, that you have brought such a great sin upon them?" Aaron's reply was full of fear and excuses, but the damage was done. The people had corrupted themselves. Judgment came swiftly. Moses stood at the camp's gate and called, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." The sons of Levi gathered around him, and that day those who remained hardened in rebellion were judged. But even in judgment, Moses' heart remained intercessory. The next day, he returned to the Lord and prayed a prayer of astonishing humility. "Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now, if you will forgive their sin, please do so. But if not, blot me out of your book that you have written." Exodus 32, 31, 32. Moses, though innocent, was willing to bear the burden of the guilty, a foreshadowing of the one who would one day intercede for all mankind. God responded with both justice and mercy. The people would continue their journey, but the weight of their rebellion would mark them. Yet God, in his relentless love, refused to abandon them. Moses, desperate for assurance, pleaded with God, "If your presence will not go with us, do not bring us up from here." He knew that no promised land, no earthly blessing, could ever replace the presence of God himself. And God answered with tender faithfulness, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Exodus 33:14. Tonight, remember this: we are all prone to wander in seasons of waiting. We are all tempted to build idols when answers delay. But even when we fail, even when we turn away, God's mercy calls us back. He does not abandon his covenant. He does not forget his promises. And when we, like Moses, dare to pray boldly, not for blessings alone, but for his very presence, he responds with grace that outlasts our failures. If tonight you feel the weight of broken promises, of mistakes too heavy to carry, know this: there is one who still intercedes for you. There is one who still leads you with his presence. There is one who still says, "I will go with you. I will give you rest." Not because you are perfect, but because he is faithful. Rest in him tonight. He is enough. After the sorrow of rebellion and the mercy of forgiveness, Moses longed for something deeper still. He had seen the miracles. He had heard the voice of God. He had climbed the mountain wrapped in fire and cloud. Yet still there was a cry from deep within his spirit: "Please show me your glory." Exodus 33:18. It was not enough for Moses to know about God. He longed to know him, to see his heart, to behold his beauty. And the Lord in his tenderness answered, "I will make all my goodness pass before you," God said, and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. But he added, You cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live. Exodus 33:19-20. So God placed Moses in the cleft of a rock, and he covered him with his hand as he passed by. Only after his glory passed did God allow Moses to see the back of his presence, a glimpse of the infinite beauty that even angels bow before. In that moment, Moses saw what few have ever glimpsed, not the fullness of God's majesty, but enough to leave his soul forever marked by glory. Then God commanded Moses to carve new tablets of stone, to replace the ones shattered in sorrow. Once again, Moses ascended Mount Sinai, and there the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him, proclaiming his name, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty. Exodus 34:6-7. It was not just power that Moses beheld, it was mercy, it was grace, it was love vast enough to forgive generations, yet holy enough to call for justice and truth. Moses fell to the ground and worshipped. He stayed there with God for 40 days and 40 nights, without food or water, sustained not by bread, but by the presence of the living God. When Moses finally descended the mountain, his face shone with the light of God's glory. The people were afraid to come near him, for the radiance was too great. He had to cover his face with a veil when he spoke to them, a visible reminder that those who dwell in the presence of God cannot help but be changed. Tonight, remember this: true transformation comes not from striving harder or doing more. It comes from lingering in the presence of God. When we draw near to him, we are changed. When we behold his mercy, his holiness, his tenderness, the light of his glory imprints itself upon our souls. If you long tonight for something deeper, if your spirit echoes the cry of Moses, show me your glory, know this: God delights to reveal himself to those who seek him with humble hearts. He does not hide himself from the weary, the broken, the longing. He invites you into the cleft of the rock, into the shelter of his presence, to behold not with physical eyes, but with the eyes of faith. And when you rise from that sacred place, you will carry his light with you into the world. You will not walk as you once did. You will walk radiant. You will walk transformed. Because when you walk with God, his glory clings to you, and his love never fades. The covenant was renewed. Mercy had triumphed over judgment. And now, with hearts humbled and faith restored, the people of Israel prepared to obey God's next call, to build a sanctuary where his presence could dwell among them. Moses gathered the congregation and spoke the words of the Lord. Take from among you a contribution to the Lord. Whoever is of a generous heart, let him bring the Lord's contribution: gold, silver, and bronze, blue and purple and scarlet yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram's skins and acacia wood, oil for the lamps, spices for the anointing oil. Exodus 35:5-8. The people responded with overwhelming generosity. Those who had once given their gold for a false idol now offered their treasures for the glory of the true God. Men and women alike brought all they had: jewelry, cloth, skins, wood, and precious stones. The artisans among them, gifted by the Spirit of God, stepped forward to craft every piece of the tabernacle with excellence and reverence. Bezalel, filled with the Spirit of God in wisdom and understanding, was appointed as chief artisan. Under his leadership, the work began, not hurriedly, but with patience, with care, with prayer. The Ark of the Covenant, was crafted first, a chest of acacia wood overlaid with pure gold, topped by the mercy seat, where two cherubim faced each other with wings outstretched, guarding the sacred place where God's presence would meet his people. The table for the bread of the presence, the golden lampstand, the altar of incense, each piece was formed exactly as God commanded, each one a reflection of a greater reality. The tabernacle itself was built from 10 curtains of fine linen, blue and purple and scarlet yarns, embroidered with cherubim, a movable sanctuary that could travel with the people wherever God led them. It was not a structure built for human glory. It was a dwelling place for the living God. And when the work was finished, every thread woven, every altar anointed, Moses inspected all the pieces, and he saw that they had done it just as the Lord commanded. Then Moses blessed them. The time had come to raise the tabernacle. They set up the frames and overlaid them with gold. They spread the curtains across the frames. They placed the ark behind the veil, shielding the mercy seat from ordinary eyes. They set the table and the lampstand and the altar in their appointed places. And when everything was ready, the most holy act was done. Moses anointed the tabernacle and all that was in it with the holy oil, consecrating it to the Lord. Then something beautiful happened. A cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not even enter, for the cloud rested upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled every space. And so, from that day onward, whenever the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the people would set out, and when the cloud rested, they would stay where they were. For the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and fire was in it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. Exodus 40, 36, 38. Tonight, remember this: God does not ask for grand cathedrals built by human pride. He asks for hearts willing to give, hands willing to serve, spirits willing to obey. He desires to dwell not only among his people, but within them. Your heart is now his tabernacle. Your life is now his dwelling place. And when you offer what you have, your talents, your time, your trust, he fills you with his glory. You may feel small, but every thread of obedience, every act of faithfulness, every offering of love builds something eternal. The God who filled the tabernacle with his glory fills your heart even now. You are his sanctuary. You are his beloved dwelling place, and his presence will never leave you. The journey through the wilderness had only just begun. The people of Israel would walk many more miles. They would face battles, doubts, rebellions, and miracles beyond imagination. They would stumble, they would question, they would fall. Yet through it all, one truth remained steady. God was with them, not because they were perfect, not because they always believed, but because he had chosen them, because he had loved them with a love stronger than their failures. Every morning the manna appeared, daily mercy laid fresh on the ground. Every night the fire burned, a light against the darkness. When they thirsted, water flowed from rocks. When they feared, his voice came through prophets. When they strayed, his discipline brought them back. He was a cloud by day and fire by night. He was the whisper on the mountain and the roar that parted seas. He was their protector, their provider, their deliverer, their God. And though their journey stretched longer than they ever imagined, though the wilderness seemed endless at times, every step was held in his hands. Tonight, your own life may feel like a wilderness. Maybe you feel lost between the Egypt you left behind and the promised land you have not yet reached. Maybe the road feels long and the nights feel lonely. But hear this truth: you are not wandering aimlessly. You are being led. The same God who led Israel through dry places leads you still. The same hands that carved commandments into stone are carving his promises into your heart. The same voice that called Moses from the bush is calling you tenderly, patiently, faithfully. You are not forgotten in the wilderness. You are not abandoned in the silence. Every desert has its hidden springs. Every trial has its hidden mercies. Every delay has its hidden purpose. And God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and Joseph, walks beside you even now. He goes before you in the cloud. He guards you in the fire. He speaks over you in the stillness. He fights for you when you cannot fight for yourself. So tonight, rest. Rest in the assurance that you are held by everlasting arms. Rest in the promise that your journey is not random, but written with care by the author of all life. And know deep in your soul that the God who walked beside them walks beside you, always, forever, faithful and true. The wilderness was not only a place of testing, it was a place of encounter. Each step Israel took was a step away from slavery and a step closer to becoming God's people in heart, not just in name. But transformation is rarely easy. As they journeyed, the people faced new fears. The barren landscape stretched endlessly before them. The heat, the hunger, the thirst, all pressed heavily against their spirits. And though they had seen miracles, though they had tasted manna from heaven and walked through parted seas, doubt still crept into their hearts. At Rephidim, they found no water. Once again, fear overcame faith. They quarreled with Moses, crying out, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt, to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" Their anger boiled into accusations, and Moses, weary and wounded, cried out to God, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." But God was not surprised by their weakness. He instructed Moses, "Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people will drink." Exodus 17:5, Nos 6. Moses obeyed. He struck the rock, and from the barren stone, life flowed. Fresh, clean water poured out into the dry ground, enough for every man, woman, and child. Life from the lifeless, hope from the hopeless. It was a sign not only of God's provision, but of his patience. He did not abandon his people because of their fear. He met them in it. He did not withhold his gifts because of their grumbling. He gave freely because he is faithful. Tonight, if you feel like your heart is a desert, cracked, dry, weary, remember this: God can bring living water from the hardest places. He can pour hope into the dry corners of your soul. He can sustain you even when you feel like you have nothing left to give. You do not have to be perfect to be loved. You do not have to be strong to be carried. You simply have to come, thirsty, tired, honest, and trust that he is enough. The rock still stands. The water still flows. The hand that struck the stone still reaches out to you. Drink deeply tonight and live. Not long after the water flowed from the rock, the people faced a new kind of trial, one they had not encountered before in freedom. An enemy rose against them. The Amalekites, fierce desert warriors, came to fight against Israel at Rephidim. The people, still fragile, still learning to walk as a nation under God's guidance, now had to stand and defend themselves. Moses turned to Joshua, a young man of courage and faith. "Choose for us men," Moses said, "and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." Exodus 17:9. Joshua gathered the men, and as the sun rose over the barren hills, the battle began. But this battle would not be won by strength alone. Moses, climbing the hilltop with Aaron and Hur beside him, lifted the staff of God high above his head, a visible sign of prayer, of dependence, of surrender to heaven's power. And as long as Moses' hands were lifted, Israel prevailed. When he lowered his hands, Amalek began to overcome. It was not the sword that secured the victory. It was the posture of prayer. But the battle was long, and Moses' arms grew heavy. Seeing his weariness, Aaron and Hur came to his side. They placed a stone beneath him to sit on, and each one held up one of his arms, steady, faithful, until the sun dipped below the horizon. Because of their faithfulness, because of Moses' intercession, and because of God's power, Joshua and the Israelites overwhelmed Amalek. After the battle, the Lord said to Moses, "Write this as a memorial in a book, and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." Exodus 17:14. And Moses built an altar, and called it, "The Lord is my banner," for he said, "A hand upon the throne of the Lord." Tonight remember this: some battles in life are not won by our own strength, but by our willingness to depend completely on God. It is not the might of our hands that brings victory. It is the lifting of our hearts toward heaven. It is the faith that even when we grow weary, God fights for us. And sometimes, when our arms tremble, when our faith falters, He sends others, friends, brothers, sisters, to hold us up until the victory is complete. You were never meant to fight alone. You were meant to live beneath the banner of God's love, to trust in His strength, and to find your victory not in striving, but in surrender. Tonight, if you feel like the battle is too much, if your arms are tired and your heart is weary, lift your eyes. There is one who fights for you, and His banner over you is love. He has never lost a battle, and He never will. After the battle against Amalek, the camp of Israel settled once more in the wilderness, surrounded by dry lands, but sustained by the faithfulness of God. One day, Moses received visitors. His father-in-law Jethro came to him, bringing Moses' wife and sons, whom Moses had sent away during the chaos of Egypt's deliverance. It was a reunion filled with joy and gratitude. Moses shared with Jethro all that the Lord had done, the miracles in Egypt, the parting of the sea, the provision of manna and water. Jethro rejoiced. "Now I know," he said, "that the Lord is greater than all gods." Exodus 18:11. Together they offered sacrifices of thanksgiving. Together they worshipped the God who had proven Himself faithful. But the next day, as Jethro observed the life of the camp, he saw a heavy burden laid upon Moses. From morning until evening, Moses sat and judged the people, hearing every dispute, every concern, every cry for guidance. The people stood in long lines, waiting for their turn. Moses listened patiently, faithfully, but he was only one man. Jethro saw the strain and spoke wisely. "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone." He advised Moses to choose capable, trustworthy men who feared God, to help judge the simpler matters, while Moses himself would handle the most difficult cases and continue to seek God's voice for the nation. It was wisdom not only to preserve Moses' strength, but to teach the people that leadership is not about one man carrying everything alone. It is about a community built on trust, on shared burdens, and on faithful stewardship. Moses listened. He appointed leaders of thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s, and so the burden was lightened, and the people received justice more swiftly. Tonight, remember this: even the strongest leaders need help. Even the most faithful servants need rest. You were not created to carry every burden alone. God designed community, not to weaken faith, but to strengthen it, not to replace dependence on him, but to extend his wisdom through many hands and many hearts. If you find yourself tonight overwhelmed by the weight you carry, the responsibilities, the fears, the silent struggles, remember the wisdom of Jethro. It is not weakness to share the load, it is wisdom. Ask for help when needed, accept support when offered, and trust that God often answers our prayers, not by removing the burden, but by sending others to walk beside us. You are not alone in the battle, you are not alone in the wilderness, and you are not alone in the calling God has placed on your life. He is with you, and He has placed others beside you to lift your arms when they grow tired. Walk forward tonight, not in isolation, but in community. For where 2 or 3 gather in His name, there He is, always faithful, always near. After the burdens were shared and the camp was strengthened, the Lord called His people to prepare for something even greater, a deeper covenant, a sacred relationship rooted in obedience and love. God spoke to Moses, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples." Exodus 19:3-5. The people gathered at the foot of Mount Sinai once more, standing in awe of the mountain that had once trembled with fire and smoke. Moses descended to deliver God's words, and with one voice the people answered, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do." It was a moment of commitment, a promise to walk not merely as a freed people, but as a holy nation, set apart for God's purposes. Moses built an altar at the base of the mountain and set up 12 pillars to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. Sacrifices were offered, and Moses took half of the blood, placing it in basins, and half he sprinkled on the altar. Then he read aloud the book of the covenant, and again the people said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient." Moses then took the blood and sprinkled it upon the people, saying, "Behold the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you, in accordance with all these words." Exodus 24:8. It was a solemn and sacred moment. A nation once enslaved was now bound to the living God, not by chains of iron, but by the bonds of love, faith, and holy promise. Then something extraordinary happened. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel ascended partway up the mountain, and there they saw the God of Israel. Beneath his feet was something like a pavement of sapphire stone, clear as the sky itself. And yet, God did not stretch out his hand against them. They beheld God, and they ate and drank in his presence. It was a foretaste of the communion God desires with his people, a reminder that his ultimate desire is not merely obedience, but relationship. God calls his people not only to serve him, but to know him, to delight in him, to sit at his table and find life in his presence. Tonight, remember this: faith is not merely about rules or rituals, it is about covenant. It is about being known by the one who made you. It is about walking in obedience, not out of fear, but out of love. The God who delivered Israel is the same God who calls you by name. He does not call you into slavery, but into sonship, not into cold religion, but into living relationship. He invites you to climb the mountain, to behold his beauty, to feast on his goodness, and to walk every day in the light of his covenant love. You are not just freed, you are chosen, you are called, you are his treasured possession. Rest in that truth tonight, and know that his promises never fail. After the covenant was sealed and the elders beheld the beauty of God's presence, Moses was called even higher into the mountain. There, alone with God, Moses received not only the tablets of stone, the foundation of God's law, but also detailed instructions for a holy life centered around worship and remembrance. God spoke of the tabernacle once more, but deeper this time: the measurements, the colors, the sacred objects. Every detail reflected not human creativity, but divine design. The Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, the golden lampstand, the altar of incense, the priestly garments, all were given as blueprints for creating a place where heaven would touch earth. God was not just dwelling above his people, he was choosing to dwell among them, walking with them through the wilderness. And at the heart of these instructions was a rhythm of rest and trust. The Sabbath. 6 days shall work be done, the Lord said. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Exodus 31:15. The Sabbath was not a burden. It was a gift, a weekly reminder that they were no longer slaves forced to labor without end. They were children of a faithful God who invited them into rest. It was a declaration that their worth was not found in endless work, but in being known and loved by the one who created them. But even as Moses lingered on the mountain, even as God spoke words of covenant love, trouble was growing below. The golden calf had been made. The people, impatient and fearful, had turned away from the God who saved them. God saw it all. His heart, filled with both righteous anger and deep sorrow, burned with grief. He spoke to Moses, "Go down, for your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves." Exodus 32:7. God offered Moses an unthinkable choice: to destroy the people and raise up a new nation from Moses alone. But Moses, though wounded by the people's betrayal, pleaded for mercy. "O Lord," he said, "turn from your burning anger and relent from this disaster against your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self." And the Lord relented. Such is the heart of intercession, standing in the gap between judgment and mercy, between failure and forgiveness. Tonight, remember this: God's instructions are not chains meant to bind you, they are pathways meant to free you. The call to rest, the call to worship, the call to walk in holiness. These are gifts from a Father who knows our frailty. And even when we fail, even when we turn aside in fear or impatience, His mercy reaches out. There is always a way back. There is always grace in the wilderness. There is always a shepherd who calls you home. If you feel tonight that you have wandered too far, that your heart has built idols of fear, ambition, or control, know this: God still invites you back. He still speaks love over your name. He still offers rest for your weary soul. Come to Him. Lay down your burdens. Receive again the gift of His mercy, and walk in the beauty of His presence once more. Moses came down from the mountain, carrying the 2 tablets of the covenant, shining with the authority and presence of God. But the sight that met his eyes was not a holy people waiting in awe. It was a nation turned wild, dancing, worshipping the golden calf their own hands had made. Grief flooded Moses' heart. The covenant was broken before it could even be delivered. In righteous sorrow, Moses threw down the tablets, shattering them at the base of the mountain, a visible sign of how the people had shattered their relationship with God. He burned the calf in fire, ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the people drink it, a bitter taste of their rebellion. Then Moses stood at the camp's entrance and cried out, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me." And from among the tribes, the sons of Levi gathered around him. That day was marked with sorrow and judgment, as sin bore its bitter cost. But even amid discipline, God's mercy did not vanish. Moses returned to the Lord in prayer, pleading not for himself, but for the people. If you will forgive their sin, please do, but if not, blot me out of your book that you have written. Exodus 32:32. Moses' heart was willing to bear the judgment of a people who had failed him, a reflection of a greater intercessor who would one day come, willing to bear the sins of the whole world. The Lord, in his faithfulness, did not destroy the nation, but he made it clear his presence would not go with them unless their hearts truly turned back. Moses, desperate for God's nearness, cried out again, "If your presence does not go with us, do not bring us up from here." More than land, more than victory, more than comfort, Moses desired God himself, and the Lord answered, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Exodus 33:14. God then called Moses to return to the mountain, to chisel out new tablets, a second chance, a new beginning. Moses ascended once more, and there God revealed his heart in full. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Exodus 34:6. Mes 7. The covenant was renewed. Mercy triumphed over judgment, and Moses, shining with the radiance of God's glory, returned to the people, not with words of condemnation, but with words of restoration. Tonight, remember this: God's faithfulness does not depend on our perfection. We stumble, we forget, we build idols of our own making, but his mercy remains. When we repent, he renews. When we return, he restores. The journey may be marked with failure, but it is also marked with forgiveness. And the God who led Israel through shattered covenants and new beginnings walks with you still. If your heart feels broken tonight, if you fear you have wandered too far, know that the same invitation stands. Come back, receive grace. Walk once more in the light of his presence. He will not forsake you. He will go with you, and he will give you rest. With the covenant renewed and the mercy of God covering them once again, the people of Israel turned their hands and hearts to the task God had given, building the tabernacle. This time it was not fear or obligation that moved them, it was gratitude. It was love. Other men and women, stirred by the Spirit of God, came forward with offerings: gold, silver, bronze, fine linen, precious stones, acacia wood. They brought their skills as well, craftsmen, weavers, metal workers, and builders, each offering their talents for the glory of the one who had redeemed them. So great was their generosity that Moses had to command them to stop bringing gifts. "There is more than enough," he said. Exodus 36:7. Imagine it. A community of former slaves, now freely giving their treasures, their time, and their talents, simply because they loved their God. Under the leadership of Bezalel and Oholiab, craftsmen filled with the Spirit of God, the work of building the tabernacle began. They built the Ark of the Covenant, the throne of God on earth, with acacia wood overlaid with pure gold, housing the tablets of the covenant inside. They crafted the mercy seat, where the glory of God would descend, flanked by cherubim of hammered gold. They constructed the table for the bread of the presence, the golden lampstand with its intricate branches, the altar of incense, and the great altar of burnt offering. They wove the curtains of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, embroidered with images of cherubim, to cover and separate the sacred spaces. Every stitch, every hammer stroke, every polished surface, all were acts of worship. When the work was completed, the tabernacle stood in the heart of the camp, a holy place, set apart, where heaven and earth would meet. Then Moses, according to all the Lord had commanded, inspected every piece. and he saw that it was good. And then Moses blessed them. It was not simply a structure of wood and gold. It was a testimony, a living reminder that even after rebellion, after brokenness, after wandering, God desired to dwell among his people. And so, when the tabernacle was set up, something incredible happened. The cloud, the visible presence of God, descended upon it. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle so fully that Moses himself could not enter. By day, the cloud covered the tabernacle. By night, fire was in the cloud, visible to all the people of Israel throughout all their journeys. Exodus 40:38. God was not distant. He was here. He was home among them. Tonight, remember this: God's desire has always been to dwell with his people, not in distant temples, not in unreachable heavens, but close, near enough to guide, near enough to comfort, near enough to call you by name. The tabernacle in the wilderness was only the beginning. One day, the Word would become flesh and dwell among us. Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, God with us, and even now through his Spirit, he makes his home not in buildings of stone or cloth, but in hearts willing to receive him. You are his dwelling place. You are his sanctuary, and his presence, like the cloud over the tabernacle, covers you day and night. He is near, he is faithful, and he is with you, always. The tabernacle stood at the center of the camp, a constant reminder that God was not far away. The people of Israel lived in tents, moving through the wilderness step by step, yet in their midst was the dwelling place of the Almighty. Every morning they would see the cloud covering the tabernacle. Every evening they would see the fire burning in the heart of the camp. It was a rhythm of grace. When the cloud lifted, they would pack up their tents and move forward. When the cloud settled, they would make camp again, trusting that even in the vast unknown desert, God knew exactly where they needed to be. Every step they took was directed not by maps or armies, but by the presence of the Lord. It taught them patience. It taught them dependence. It taught them to trust not in their own understanding, but in the God who sees the end from the beginning. There were moments of great faith, songs sung after victories, praises lifted after provisions of manna and water. But there were also moments of deep weakness, complaints rising from weary hearts, doubts clouding their vision, fears tempting them to turn back toward Egypt. And yet, through it all, God's faithfulness never changed. He fed them daily. He healed their wounds. He forgave their rebellions. He renewed his promises again and again. When they were thirsty, he brought water from the rock. When they were hungry, he rained down bread from heaven. When enemies rose against them, he fought on their behalf. He was their cloud by day and fire by night, their provider, protector, and guide. Tonight, remember this: life is a journey through wilderness places. There are seasons of waiting. There are days when the path seems unclear. There are nights when fear whispers that you are lost. But you are not lost. You are led. The God who led Israel by cloud and fire leads you now by his Spirit. You may not see the full map. You may not know tomorrow's path, but you can know the one who goes before you. Trust the pace he sets. Trust the pauses as well as the progress. When he says wait, it is for your protection. When he says move, it is for your good. And through it all, his presence never leaves you. Not in the dry seasons, not in the dark valleys, not in the restless nights. He is with you, closer than the air you breathe, more faithful than the rising sun. You are not wandering alone. You are following a shepherd who knows the way home. Rest in that truth tonight. The same cloud that led Israel through the desert now covers your life with mercy. The same fire that lit their nights now burns in your heart through his Spirit. You are seen, you are known, you are guided, and you are deeply, endlessly loved. In every season of the wilderness, God's heart was revealed more clearly to his people. He was not just a mighty deliverer who brought them out of Egypt. He was a tender shepherd, walking with them step by step, teaching them to rely not on strength or sight, but on his voice alone. The wilderness stripped away every false security. They had no cities to hide in, no armies to trust, no storehouses to rely on, only the presence of God, steady, faithful, unfailing. It was not the easiest path. It was not the quickest route, but it was the right one, because it taught them the most precious truth. Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Every trial, every thirst, every longing was an invitation to trust deeper, to love greater, to know the one who had called them by name. Sometimes, in their weakness, they grumbled. Sometimes they rebelled. Sometimes they doubted whether the God who had parted seas could really provide for another day. But God remained patient. He disciplined when needed, but never abandoned. He corrected when needed, but never turned his face away, because his love was not built on their perfection. It was built on his covenant. It was rooted in his character, and it remains unshakable. Tonight, as you reflect on your own journey, know this: wilderness seasons are not evidence that God has left you. They are evidence that he is leading you through. When you feel you have no strength left, he is your strength. When you do not know which way to turn, he is your compass. When fear whispers lies, his word anchors you in truth. The same God who spoke from the fire of Sinai now speaks to your heart through his Spirit. The same God who fed the Israelites with manna now feeds your spirit with daily mercies. The same God who guided with cloud and flame now walks beside you in ways too deep for sight, but too real to deny. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are not wandering aimlessly. You are being led by a hand more loving and more wise than you can imagine. Tonight, lift your eyes. See the pillar of cloud that still covers you. Feel the warmth of the fire that still guards your way, and rest, knowing that the God who walked beside them walks beside you too. He will not leave you. He will not fail you, and he will bring you safely home. The wilderness was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. From the dry places and long journeys, from the nights under the stars and the days following the cloud, a people were being shaped, not by the hardships they faced, but by the faithfulness of the one who walked beside them. They learned that freedom was not just escaping Pharaoh's chains. Freedom was learning to trust. Freedom was learning to follow. Freedom was learning that God's presence is better than any promised land, better than any earthly treasure. Through every step, through every battle, through every prayer and every failure, through every moment of thirst and hunger, God was there. He did not abandon them when they grumbled. He did not forsake them when they doubted. He did not turn away when they were weak. He remained steadfast and sure, a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, a whisper at Moses' side, a fountain in the desert, a healer for their wounds, a father for their wandering hearts. Tonight, your journey may feel uncertain. You may feel like you are walking through dry places, facing battles you did not expect, waiting for promises that seem slow to come. But the God of Israel is your God too. The same hands that carried them through the wilderness carry you. The same voice that called them his treasured possession calls you beloved. The same presence that hovered over their tents now fills your heart with peace that passes understanding. You do not walk alone. Every step, every breath, every moment, he is there, guiding you, when you cannot see the way, strengthening you when your legs grow weary, fighting for you when your hands fall weak, and loving you always, endlessly, faithfully. The wilderness will not last forever. There is a promised land ahead, a place of fulfillment, a place of joy, a place of peace. But even now, even here, His presence is enough. Even before you reach the destination, His goodness is surrounding you. Rest in Him tonight. Trust His timing. Trust His leading. Trust His love. The same God who parted seas still moves mountains for you. The same God who gave manna in the morning still provides daily mercies for your soul. The same God who walked beside Israel through the wilderness walks beside you through every season. He is your cloud by day. He is your fire by night. He is your safe place, your strong tower, your unfailing hope. And He will never leave you, not for a moment, not for a breath, not for all eternity.